It's that time of year again, the enrollment period for your child to participate in camps and other extracurricular activities. But are parents and caregivers asking the right questions? Joining me with more on keeping kids safe is Beverly Hutchison, Director of Development and Marketing for the D. Norton Child Advocacy Center. Thanks again for joining us, and it's good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
So how have things been going? COVID, just made things really tough on a lot of people, but we know that your organization kept trucking.
We have been really fortunate that we've been able to figure out ways to continue to provide services for children and families. It's taken a little bit of pivoting, a lot of teamwork, a lot of really great collaboration with community partners like law enforcement, solicitor's office, social services. But throughout it all, we've been able to continue to do forensic interviews. We were able to resume treatment using telemental health platforms. So we've learned a lot. Like most people, we've learned a lot about how to do our business differently.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since we've had you on the program. Maybe you can remind our viewers exactly what D. Norton is and does.
Sure, I'd love that. D. Norton is a child advocacy center, which means we help children and families when there's been a concern about abuse. Our mission is to prevent abuse, protect children, and heal families. And that's why I'm excited to talk to you today a little bit more about the prevention side of our work, which is trying to make sure that parents and caregivers have the tools they need to do what they can to prevent this terrible thing from ever happening to their own children.
It's true. People tend to be very trusting. They take things for granted sometimes, or just totally unsuspecting. And when you put your child into the care of someone else, you just never know. And there are certain things that you should be asking that you can mitigate any potential for something bad to happen. And so we want to talk about that. Parents and caregivers are putting their kids through camps, spring, summer, it's here, sports. So where do you want to start? What should people be asking before they enroll their children in these programs?
Sure. You want to know what policies and procedures any organization, any program has around child abuse prevention. And, there's some really easy questions we can be asking of these organizations, like, do they do formal child abuse prevention training? Do they have rules around the number of adults to children? What happens if there is a concern? How does this organization handle reports of inappropriate activity? All of these questions do a couple of things. One, it helps assure the caregiver that, to the best of their knowledge, they're putting their child in a place where they will be safe. It also lets the organizations, I think it's good for the organizations to hear parents ask these questions so that they can be aware that, these policies and procedures they have in place are actually very important to parents, and parents want to hear about them.
Yeah, and we'll also get into COVID because that adds a whole other layer of concerns for parents, but background checks, things like this. Now, when you ask the program, the organization which you want to enroll your child, what are some of the answers that you shouldn't be satisfied with? Because or is there anything that you can get in writing to feel that much more secure that the answers that the questions that you're getting answered are sufficient?
I think one of the things that would cause concern is if they don't have answers.
Yeah.
If they're not able to answer these pretty basic questions about how the program runs, if they don't have a really strong policy around the number of children to adults. An adult should never be one-on-one behind closed doors with any child. So, if they're not really clear about that, I think that's a cause for concern. If they don't do background checks, I think that's something to consider before you put your child there. Because those are the things, they do a couple of things. It makes sure that the agency has done their part to make sure that the staff that they are hiring is safe. But it also, perpetrators of these kinds of acts also look for easy access. So where there are good policies in place, where it's known that this organization does these things to protect their kids, well, if that's a known fact, then one of these alleged perpetrators is going to go somewhere else where the rules aren't as stated, as observed. So there's several layers of protection in asking these questions and having these policies.
Well, this is a great place to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the other things that you should be asking, and also COVID safety, very important. We're back in 2 minutes. We're back with Beverly Hutchison. She's Director of Development at the Norton Child Advocacy Center. We've been talking about keeping kids safe now that it's time to enroll them in extracurricular activities, summer camps. And when we talk about background checks, I want to move on to some other stuff real quick here, Beverly, but background checks should not necessarily be only for the employees, the counselors of the program. It should be for all the peripheral employees as well, because sometimes people get into those organizations by ways of circumventing some of those requirements.
Yeah. So anyone that would have access or interaction with the children certainly should have background checks. And, that includes a lot of, as you said, that peripheral staff.
Yeah. And a camp and their ACA accreditation, what does this mean? And does it really, I don't know, does it ensure a parent that things are top tier?
I think it is another point of reference.
Okay.
I would take, I think that's another point as you're asking all these questions and accumulating all of this information is another good point of reference. Does it standing alone ensure that your child would be safe? I would prefer to have more information than just one point of reference.
Okay. And how about reporting abuse? If a child comes to a counselor and says something happened and they either make a note of it or not, do they call the authorities? What should be expected?
There should be a policy for that. So if abuse is reported, I would be asking what happens next. And it should go up and it should be handled in a serious manner. It should, if there are mandated reporters in the state of South Carolina who are mandated to report suspected abuse, that means that you don't have to know it happened. So, taking those things very seriously and making those reports to the proper authority are things that I'd want to see in a policy before I put my child somewhere.
Absolutely. And finally, COVID safety. What do you think are the doable requirements, I guess, when you're dealing with a camp? I mean, social distancing, obviously.
Well, Norton is not a medical entity, so I would encourage people to, make sure that they are following the guidelines that their family has decided are safe for their children. Are they following CDC guidelines? I think those are questions to be asked so that each parent can make their own decisions. Families are handling this situation in a variety of ways, right? So every family's got to make those choices. And in making those choices, they would want to consider their own child's emotional and behavioral well-being. How are they doing right now? Are they ready to re-engage at this level? Talking to your children about what are do they have any concerns about going to camp, and what are those concerns? And
if they do have concerns, then they should just do something at home. It doesn't have to be this year. They can always wait until later on. Well, Beverly, I want to thank you so much. Excellent tips. Absolutely. Thank you.